A wonderful morning to everyone who has joined today. From Manage Engine family, we would like to extend our warm welcome and sincere thanks to all our customers, partners, and users who are interested in our solutions. Endpoint management and security is one of the main focus areas of Manage Engine. In today's session, we will be covering patch management. Let me introduce myself. My name is Jayshree, and I am a product specialist with Manage Engine for over 6 years. I take care of the endpoint management products, including Endpoint Central. I am a seasoned technical support engineer assisting customers in their implementation, consultation, and troubleshooting in case of any challenges. In today's webinar, we will be focusing on endpoint management solutions, which has different product portfolios under management and security. We have tools like Vulnerability Manager Plus, Patch Manager Plus, Browser Security Plus, Device Control Plus, OS Deployer, and Mobile Device Manager. These products take care of their own native requirement as a standalone tool. But Endpoint Central is a complete unified endpoint management tool that has all these features under a single roof. I would say Endpoint Central is a suite of all these products supported under one web console. Apart from this, if you have a major requirement for managing only third-party application, I would recommend Patch Connect Plus. Patch Connect Plus is a simple component that can be installed in a CCM to deploy third-party patches. As you can see, we offer wide variety of products to handle all of your endpoint management and security concerns. To know more about our products, you shall visit our website mentioned on the slide. Once again, I welcome you all to the Endpoint Central training program. In today's session, we will be specifically discussing on handling patch management in the digital workspace or patch management with respect to the distributed workforce. Let us take a look on the overview of our training. We are on week 1 of series 6, which is patch management. This is one of the modules of our endpoint management and security suite. All these sessions will be recorded and made available in the below mentioned website. All the registered participants will receive an email with the recorded training video. You can also attend our free training series and claim your certificate on completing the series of courses. Patch management for distributed workforce. Before we start the meeting, I would like to take you through the agenda for the day. We will have an overview of what patch management and its features are, followed by its architecture in how Endpoint Central works. We will be discussing about the effective ways in which you shall manage endpoints that are distributed in various geographical locations. We will also be discussing about the strategic planning in managing these endpoints and network access control. Concluding the session with most frequently asked questions with answers. During the last webinar, most of our customers have raised valuable questions. We have collated and added them into our today's questionnaire, and I will be explaining them to you in detail. During the training, if you come across any questions, feel free to use the chat option to chat with our expert team. We will also collect all the questions raised during the session, and they will also be published for the larger audience. For the presentation, we will be using Endpoint Central Server build version 10.1.2137.10, and this application supports all the browsers. Across the globe, we have started embracing the new normal, and for an IT administrator, the new normal now means a distributed workforce. Managing and securing devices across the distributed workforce can come with quite a lot of challenges. Let us consider a live example to understand the distributed workforce scenario better. It would be easier for us to correlate with these with examples, as we suggest multiple methods to manage and patch the endpoints remotely. John is one of our customers who is managing a chain of hotels in multiple locations and managing 10,000 computers in his network, which is spread across the globe. As we can see from the picture, each remote office comes with its own requirements in terms of number of endpoints managed, bandwidth, and the mode of connectivity. So, the IT team now has to figure out the ways to test the newly released patches, deploy it periodically, and monitor all the endpoints. Let us take a look at how John can handle both the situation with the features available in Endpoint Central. There are two types of users John will have to cater to. Users who connect to the Endpoint Central server via VPN, and the users who are connecting over the internet. Apart from the roaming users, John should also devise a strategy to get the back to office missions up and running. Now that the offices are opening up in some parts of the world, IT admins need to check the compliance status of those missions that are getting back to the office. We will be discussing more about this in the upcoming slides. Our organization has completely adopted remote and distributed work culture. This can be challenging for IT admins who now have to consider various factors before initiating a patch task for the distributed workforce. Some of those factors are bandwidth constraint, keeping the end users informed about the patch task, time constraint while applying these patches, reboot schedule, and troubleshooting. We will be looking on how we can include these factors in managing and securing the distributed workforce. But before that, let us get a brief understanding on what Desktop Central is. Desktop Central is a unified endpoint management solution that ensures all your endpoints are secure and enable the users to use them effectively for business. A popular research analyst called Forrester defines UEM as follows: products that provide a centralized policy engine for managing and securing employee laptops and mobile devices from a single console. In unified endpoint management, you can manage endpoints in a traditional IT management fashion. This includes patch management, application management, configuration deployment, OS deployment, tools for troubleshooting, and automate the day-to-day routine management activities. Similarly, endpoints can also be managed with modern management. All modern operating systems support modern management. It supports features like geo-tracking, geo-fencing for your laptops, and distribute the store applications profile distribution to enforce restrictions, operating system reset, and recovery. Hence, with Endpoint Central UEM Edition, we get a complete integration of client management capabilities combined with mobile device management on modern management for Windows and Mac. You can handle all of your endpoints right from device provisioning towards vulnerability assessments, ensuring their security and supports analytical data and comprehensive reports. So, with Endpoint Central Unified Endpoint Management Solution, you will be able to manage desktops, laptops, mobile phones and tablets, servers, point of sale devices, and browsers all from a single console. Customers and users have also recognized Endpoint Central as a wholesome UEM solution, and it has been awarded accolades with same under various forums. We support three operating system platforms for now: Windows, Mac, and Linux. And here is the complete list of operating systems supported by Endpoint Central. The application server runs on the Windows platform, but you can manage the endpoints with Windows, Mac, and Linux operating systems. In case you have any questions, you can always reach out to the support by referring the email address mentioned in the slide. As Endpoint Central users are aware, patch management comes as a feature in Endpoint Central. If you require patch management as a separate product, then we have a standalone tool called Patch Manager Plus in both on-premise and cloud solution. Now, we are stepping into the actual core of the patch management overview. And this supports 1,000 plus applications in Endpoint Central. That includes Windows, Mac, and Linux, and we also support 500 plus third-party applications. Based on the use cases, a lot of customers had questions on which updates are supported by Endpoint Central Patch Management. So here is the description. We support security-only updates, monthly roll-ups, cumulative updates, feature pack updates, optional updates, definition updates, and the automatic handling of service stack updates. We do support the extended security updates for the end-of-life operating systems like Windows 7, 2008, 2008 R2 servers, provided if they have extended support license enabled. When it comes to server patching, we support patching for Windows servers and Linux servers with security and non-security updates. As you all know, the latest feature pack Windows 10 21H2 is supported in Endpoint Central. You can also upgrade your Windows 10 machines to Windows 11 with the patch management supported in Endpoint Central Unified Endpoint Management. So, once the feature pack is released, service or support will be available for 18 to 30 months based on the edition of Windows 10 that you are running. With Desktop Central Unified Endpoint Management, you will be able to automate all these feature pack deployments. We will be seeing more information about the feature pack deployment as well as how to automate the process as we proceed further. Here is the full approach recommended by Microsoft for patch management. As you all know, second Tuesday of every month is considered to be the Patch Tuesday for Microsoft. During this time, Microsoft releases a lot of security and non-security updates. Most of the customers only consider the security updates and tend to ignore the non-security updates. As you can see in this image, this is how Microsoft tests and deploy the patches in test environment. We would always recommend you to give high priority for the critical security updates, but at least on the third or fourth week, we recommend you to deploy all the other required patches in order to achieve the fully patched recommended state of Microsoft. So this will ensure your environment is kept healthy. Let us also have an overview of the patch management architecture. Whenever a patch is released, it is made available in the vendor sites. Our crawler team repeatedly probes the internet to draw the vulnerability information from the vendor site. Once the download is completed, the patches will be tested in our environment for successful installation, compatibility, and the applicability checks are also being done. Post which, the updates will be published to the central patch repository. Now, the Endpoint Central server running in your environment subscribes to the central patch repository to download the vulnerability database periodically. Once the process is completed, the client machines will be scanned in order to identify the missing patches. After identifying the missing patches, Endpoint Central server will directly download the required patches from the vendor sites. And the managed computers, based on from where they are connected, they are now allowed to download the patches from the Endpoint Central server or from the internet directly. However, you will have the control to define the deployment date and time. Now let us take a look at how the endpoints can be managed in a distributed workforce. Patching roaming users. There are two ways in which these users can be managed. One is to secure gateway server. The domain users can connect to the secure gateway server. Thereby, you don't have to expose the Endpoint Central server to the internet. So all the communication between the agent and the Endpoint Central server will happen through the secure gateway server. I am going to take you to the web console of Endpoint Central and show you how this configuration can be done. Going to the Desktop Central web console. So for configuring this, you will have to navigate to Admin, NAT settings. So this is where you will be configuring the public FQDN. Once it is done, you can navigate to Admin again, Secure Gateway Server, and you can install the Secure Gateway component. You will be allocating a dedicated mission, and once the Secure Gateway component is installed, the roaming machines will now communicate with the public FQDN. And this will ensure the roaming machines are posting every information to the Endpoint Central server. So this will allow the Endpoint Central to cater the needs of roaming users through the secure gateway server. So back to the presentation. Now the second category, work from home users who need a direct download to be implemented. Endpoint Central offers a feature called direct download. This is to conserve bandwidth for the above mentioned VPN users. The agents can now directly download the patches from the internet without any dependency on the Endpoint Central server. So there are a couple of prerequisites to enable the direct download. First, you need to ensure you're running the latest build version of Endpoint Central. And you need to apply a simple configuration to allow the VPN connected work from home endpoints to download the required patches directly. Let me show you how this configuration is done. Going back to the Endpoint Central console. So for configuring this direct download configuration, you will have to navigate to threats and patches, deployment, disable automatic updates, and here you will have the configuration called enable agents to directly download the patches. So here you can click on create configuration. So here you will be able to choose the machines for which you want to deploy this configuration. You can target it for the whole remote office or the whole domain, or you can also target it to a specific group of computers by using this filter option. Once defined, you can deploy this immediately to your endpoints. Once the direct download is enabled, the agents will start to download the patches directly from the internet. Back to Office machines. There are few factors that an administrator should look for when the machines are back to Office. So the factors are quarantining the non-compliant machines, updating the unpatched applications, deploying the feature packs, and deploying updates based on the user's availability. So we are going to discuss the situation one by one. Previously, we have seen how to manage the endpoints during the work from home scenario, and now we shall create a patch routine for back to office machines. The first objective will be enabling network access control for the non-compliant machines and identifying the critical applications to patch them in priority. Post which, we will be creating a system restore point for all the work from home machines. In case of experiencing any challenges through patch deployment tasks, we are safe to restore the backup, and that's the primary objective of creating the system restore point. The next objective is to keep the end users informed about the patching schedule so that they can be prepared. And then we will be testing the newly released patches on a pilot group before deploying them to bulk computers. And based on the testing results, we will be approving the patches and deploy them to highly vulnerable systems to generate a report based on the activities. Now, let's take a look at them one by one. Here is the workflow of network access control. Network access control is used to tighten the network security by restricting the endpoints that does not satisfy the compliant requirements of an organization. This will enable the system administrator to allow or restrict the access to organization's network for the endpoints that fails to confirm the compliant settings defined by the administrator. As we take at the workflow, the administrator will create a policy that defines the compliance status. If any system is found to be non-compliant, the network resources of those systems get restricted automatically. By default, the compliance status of all the systems are checked automatically during every refresh cycle. We will be discussing about the refresh cycle in the upcoming sessions, and the compliance status of the quarantine missions to which the compliance policies has been deployed will be checked every time when there is an IP change. That is, whenever the machine is reconnected to the network, the compliance is automatically rechecked. Now, let me show you how this can be done. We have even published an article on how to install and run the NAC module. I have already downloaded it, and this is how the quarantine policy generator looks like. Here, you will be able to allocate or search a specific keyword based on softwares or services. You can also set the domain or IP address that you wish to allow for the quarantine machine. For example, if a software exists or does not exist, you will be able to block all the network or block specific intranet range. So we are defining a custom check before the machine enters our network. You will be creating this policy, and this policy will be deployed to all the client machines as a configuration. Here is a screenshot on how the deployment zip looks like. If you see here, there is a test on a software if it exists or not. And there is also a test on a service if it exists or not. So if both the software and service exist, we are going to block all the network access for that machine. And this will be created as a policy and we will be deploying it as a configuration. Creating system restore point for the back to office machine. As mentioned earlier, in case of any issues during the patch deployment task, you will be safer to use this restore point in Endpoint Central. Let me show you how to create a system restore point for the back to office missions. Going back to the Endpoint Central console, so you will have to navigate to the configurations part, script repository, and you can search for the template for restore. And you can add this template to the script repository. Once it is added, you can create this as a computer configuration and you can deploy this to your endpoints. Once this is deployed, the system restore point will be generated on the targeted endpoints. Next, we will also be looking at identifying the critical applications to patch, followed by testing them in pilot missions, and then we will be deploying them to the production environment. So let's take a look at the web console on how to achieve these scenarios. In order to identify the critical applications, you have to navigate to threats and patches So here you will be able to see the list of missing patches that are applicable to your environment. In case if you want to filter for the specific patch type or specific patch criteria, you can just use this filter icon and you can add the respective criteria here. So if I want to filter for the patch severity, critical and important, I will just use the severity equals critical and important. And if I need only the security updates, I will add another filter called patch type equals security updates. So once I apply this, I will be getting the respective list of updates pertaining to this criteria. So once I have the list of latest patches released based on this criteria, I can test these patches in my pilot group environment. So for testing the patches, you can navigate to this deployment tab. So you have a test and approve module over here. So under test and approve module, you will have two options. That would be automatically without testing and test and approve. So if you don't have a pilot group environment, you can go ahead with the first option. But the best practice is to always test the patches in your pilot group environment in order to check its correctness and compatibility with respect to your environment. So for proceeding with that, you have to toggle to this option and you have to save this setting. After saving this, you will have to create your test group. For creating the test group, the first criteria that you have to define is the platform to which your test machines belong to. And then you will have to create the group of computers of test machines with the help of this custom group functionality, which is available within Endpoint Central. And after which you will have to define the type of updates and the severity of updates that you would like to test in your pilot group environment. And similar to Microsoft updates, we also support third-party updates, antivirus, and driver updates. So you can enable the respective patch types and severities according to your patching requirement. And if you want to delay the patch deployment based on the release date, you have the option here for delaying it as well. And here you can associate the deployment policy, which comprises the details like the deployment window, user notification, and the reboot policy. We will be discussing in detail regarding the deployment policy in the upcoming slides. And once the patches are getting deployed or getting approved, and if you want to get a notification regarding the approval and deployment failures, you can enable this notification and provide the respective technician's email ID. And once the testing is done, you will have to define the approval mode for your tested patches. And you have two kinds of approval here. One would be the automatic approval and another one would be the manual approval. If you want to have an automatic approval, you will have to enable this option and you will have to provide the delay after which the patches have to be approved. So during the delay period, you can monitor your endpoints for any issues post patching. And if you encounter any issues, you can even decline the patch within this test and approve setup. So what you can do is you can just go to the test and approve page and you can click on the test group machines for which you have applied the patch, and you can go to this patch view and select the patch which has caused the issue, and you can decline it to the specific computer or for the group of computers as per your requirement. This is how we will be testing and approving the patches. Back to the presentation. Let's see what the next scenario is. Feature pack deployment. Endpoint Central do support feature pack deployments. So you can directly upgrade the older version of your Windows 10 machines to the latest Windows 10 21H2. You can also upgrade your Windows 10 machines to the Windows 11 version. We have made a dedicated article including the steps for the upgrade of Windows 10 to Windows 11. We recommend you to contact the support team for instructions, or you can post a query in the chat for the expert team to assist you now. Deployment based on user availability. The benefits of enabling this report is to understand the pattern of users' active time in a day to plan patch deployment activity. Let me show you how this report can be exported from Endpoint Central. So, for exporting this report, you will have to navigate to Reports, Power Management Reports. Here, you can find the System Uptime Report. With this custom reporting, we have supported the key details like the domain name and the remote office details associated with the active user, which will eventually allow the administrator to define the activities of patch deployment. So, based on the uptime of the machines, we are recommending you to plan your patch deployment activity. Now we are going to create a new set of policies for the work from home endpoints to allow the users to skip the deployment, use the scheduled reboot policies. Now, let me show you how to create a deployment policy based on a situation. As mentioned, every configuration you create is associated with a deployment policy, and you can create n number of deployment policies based on the need. So, to show you how to configure the deployment policy, let us navigate to the Endpoint Central console. So you will have to navigate to threats and patches here, deployment and deployment policies. So there will be many predefined policies available within the tool. But if you want to create your own customized policy, you can go with this create policy option. So the first thing that you can define here is the week, days, and the time for your patch deployment. For example, if your patching window is on the Patch Tuesday week because Microsoft release patches during every second Tuesday in a month. So if you want to configure the patching window in the same week, you can toggle to this based on Patch Tuesday split, and you can choose the weeks, days, and the time accordingly. You also have the option to define when the patches have to be downloaded by the agent from the server. So if you want both the download and deployment to happen only during the deployment window, you can use the first option. In case, if you want to stage the patches in the client machines in advance to the deployment window, you can make use of the second option. Also, you can define when exactly the deployment should be started, like during the system startup, refresh cycle, or either of these, whichever is happening earlier. And the next thing would be the pre-deployment activities. If you're going to sleep mode before the deployment window, in order to wake them up, you can include a task for this wake on LAN. And if you want to pre-reboot your endpoints before beginning the patch deployment, you can include a task for it and you can customize it as per your requirement. And if you want to include any custom script, for example, if you want to start a specific service or stop a specific service or take a snapshot, whatever might be the use case that you have in your environment, you can just create a custom script and upload it here so that it will be executed before beginning the patch deployment. Before beginning the deployment, if you want to notify the users regarding the deployment, you can enable this option here. And along with that, you can also provide them an option to skip the deployment. And if the end user is continuously skipping the deployment, in order to make sure that the deployment is getting completed within the stipulated deployment window, you can force the deployment after a specific number of days. And to show the deployment progress to the users, you can enable this checkbox here. And finally, you can define the post-deployment activities. In post-deployment activities, you can define this reboot policy. So in reboot, you have multiple options that can be customized in a very granular way. So you have two options here. One would be the force reboot and another one would be the delay reboot. And the force reboot, you can make the missions reboot immediately after deployment, but within the deployment window. In case if your reboot window is different than your deployment window, then you can define the reboot time over here. In case if the machines are end user laptops or desktops, and if you don't want the machines to be rebooted forcefully, then you can provide them an option to delay the reboot. When this is chosen, you will be able to define when the prompt has to be shown to the end users. And when the prompt is being shown, you can define what are the intervals that has to be made visible to the end users. So the end users can choose the convenient postpone interval and they can reboot the machines at their own convenience. But if the users are continuously postponing it, you can display a forced reboot window after a specific number of hours. Also, at the last moment of rebooting the machines, in order to make sure that the user is not losing any of his work that he's working on, you can provide a timeout of 2 to 5 minutes so that he will be aware of the forced reboot that is going to occur and he can save all his existing works. And this option, skip reboot for the machines that do not require a reboot. This can be enabled as a best practice because there might be patches which will not require a reboot to complete the installation. So for such patches, in order to avoid unnecessary reboots because of this reboot policy, you can enable this checkbox. And if you want to exclude the reboot for your server OS alone, then you can enable this option over here. Similar to pre-deployment activities, you can also include custom script in post-deployment activities. So if you have stopped a specific service before beginning the patch deployment, and if you want to start it again, you can make use of this custom script option. So this is how you will be creating your customized deployment policies, and you can allocate it to the respective group of computers. So now we will see the screenshot of the reboot policies that will be shown to the end users. So this is how the screenshot looks like when the end user gets a skip reboot notification. From the drop-down, they can choose to skip it for 6 hours or 8 hours, and they can also select a time for reboot to occur. And they will also be alerted with the time when the machine is going to be rebooted. This is when the end user want to skip the reboot. So you can define an exact time when this has to be done. And also for the policy for servers, as we discussed earlier, you can also set up a time frame when the deployment should go through. We can wake and deploy the patches if the machine is on LAN. And here is the screenshot of the forced reboot pop-up that appears on the screen. We will be providing a default timeout of 5 minutes before the forced reboot so that the user can save all the work that is open. In case if you want to extend the timeout, that is also possible through the deployment policy. Now, having discussed about the deployment policy and the testing process, we will see how the patch task can be automated to your production machines with the help of the automated patch deployment task. So for creating the automated patch deployment task, you will have to again navigate to threads and patches here, deployment and automate patch deployment. And you can choose to automate tasks and choose the respective OS flavor And then you can define the patch types and criteria as per your requirement. This will be similar to the test and approve configuration. You can define the patch types and severities as per your requirement for Microsoft, third-party, antivirus, and drivers. In case if you want to delay the patch deployment based on the release period or the approval period, you can make use of this option. And you can associate the deployment policy which is suitable for your production environment. And here comes the actual targeting part. You can target your endpoints based on remote office and domain as a higher level of hierarchy. And if you want to drill it down further, you can click on this filter icon and you can target based on the Active Directory attributes if you have integrated your Active Directory, or you can use the attributes available in Endpoint Central as well. And if you want to exclude any targets from deployment, you can make use of this exclude target option. And finally, once the patch deployments are done, in order to make the admin notify regarding the deployment failures and deployment progress, you can configure the notification and define the format of the report like PDF, CSV, or in an Excel format with the respective email ID. So now with Desktop Central or Endpoint Central, we have discovered the critical patches, tested the patches in our pilot group environment, and approved them based on the behavior of the test machines. Once the patches are approved, we are utilizing this automated patch deployment module for rolling out the approved patches to your production environment. And once the patching is done, you will be getting the insightful reports regarding the patch deployment activity. Going back to the presentation here, now see the patch management at a glance. This is independent of WSCS. It's a cross-platform patch management application as it supports platforms like Windows, Mac, Linux, and third-party applications. We can also leverage various features of test and approve and automate the deployment task with flexible deployment policies to suit the organization's needs. We could easily tweak the features to suit the patch management requirement and utilize the filters to collect reports based on the audit requirements. So this is the overview of the patch management module of Endpoint Central Unified Endpoint Management. We also have other modules with features software deployment, inventory, MDM, OS deployment, tools, and reports. Let us take a look at the Endpoint Central architecture, mainly for the benefit of the attendees who are not familiar with the product. Endpoint Central is an on-premise solution that supports client-server application model. You can have Endpoint Central server hosted in any of the supported Windows OS. This architecture talks about how you can manage the devices in LAN and wide area network. The workflow of Endpoint Central will be discussed with more detailed information in the upcoming sessions. Endpoint Central is currently available as a native cloud solution. You shall sign up for the below URL to start accessing the Endpoint Central Cloud Edition. We have collated some of the FAQs and we are going to discuss on that. If we have an automatic update scheduled for 100 computers and I choose to have it pre-download patches during the refresh cycle, would all the systems still execute the updates in order, or would all systems would update at the same time since it should be already downloaded? So the concept is, if we have enabled the agent to pre-download the updates, it is downloading all the required patches that is present in the configuration, and it is stored locally on the client machine. Now, once the deployment window starts, all the machines will just start to focus on the deployment. Thereby, we are reducing the time taken for the download. So the main reason to enable this feature is to initiate the deployment immediately during the scheduled deployment window. Local office machine are now at work from home. How do we make them contact the Endpoint Central server? As we discussed earlier, if a machine is not on VPN, we need a secure gateway server to establish the communication to the Endpoint Central server. And if they are connected via VPN, the agent will communicate with the Endpoint Central server directly without the need of SGS. Do I need to disable WSDS if I use Windows patches and updates on Endpoint Central? Yes, we recommend you to disable the automatic updates on Windows as well as the other third-party applications so that you can handle all of them from a single console. So Endpoint Central will capture the details of the required updates and also the date and time when it was installed. So this will help you to get a report from one single console. Is there a way for Endpoint Central to download all the necessary patches, then restart only once for end users? Yes, the agent will scan for the missing patches, deploy them based on a schedule, and it would check for reboot on every update. So once all the patches are installed on the schedule, it executes a reboot as per the policy defined. When I exclude or decline a patch, is this removed from the patch management dashboard page? Yes. When you decline a patch, it is not calculated as missing update for that computer. Let me also show you how to decline a patch. So we have selective exclusions and permanent exclusions. Selective exclusion is when if you want to decline a patch from a particular configuration or a task, you go with that method. So to show you how to configure this, you will have to go to the threats and patches and deployment, automated patch deployment. And when you're creating the automated task, you will have an option to include specific application here. So when you choose the type of updates and severity of updates, you will get these two options. That is patch only specific applications. So you can discover the applications installed in your environment and choose the one that has to be included. Or if you want to exclude any specific application, you can go with this third option and you can exclude them from patching. And permanent exclusion will come under this decline patch view. So you will have to go to this patches here, decline patch, and you will have to select the group of missions for which you want to decline the patch. And then when you come to the decline process, it can be declined based on a specific patch ID, or you can decline it based on the whole application or the whole family. So now going back to the questions, our business applications misbehave occasionally, and I suspect that recent patch deployments could be the cause. How can I roll back the patch? In general, Endpoint Central supports the rollback for Microsoft updates. In fact, we have updated the uninstallation support status of every patch. If the vendor has supported the uninstallation or rollback, we have added them same in the Endpoint Central. You can find the details in the missing patches section, and we can proceed to uninstall the patch from one computer or all the computers at the same time. While deploying the patches, I come across below errors on multiple clients. How to get this fixed? The reported errors could be due to multiple reasons. As you can see, it is related to Office updates. So we have a detailed troubleshooting article added to the product console. Generally, we will be adding the KB article beside the error code when it occurs, and there are some troubleshooting steps mentioned in it. And even after following the instructions, if you are facing any issues, you can further reach out to the technical support team for further assistance. Is it possible to disable the end user notification on a single machine? For example, if you have a kiosk. Yes, this is something that you're customizing when you create a patch deployment configuration for a single machine. You can decide to allow the end users to skip the deployment or not. As we have seen in the deployment policy, you can either disable or enable the user notification so that they can be allowed to proceed or skip the reboot or patch deployment task. How soon are the patches available to me after being released by Microsoft? So, as soon as the patches are released, our team will start the testing process to add the checksums and detection logic. Once it is done, the patches will be released on our database. You can expect the security updates within 12 hours and the rest of the updates within a max of 24 hours. I could see a difference in the patches discovered by Endpoint Central against WSCS and Windows Update. Why? In case of operating system like Windows 7, 8.1, Server 2008, 2012, Windows does not detect the security-only updates, but Endpoint Central will collect the data from various resources like Windows Updates, Microsoft Catalog, and show the total count of missing patches, which is the reason why there is a discrepancy between Endpoint Central and Windows Updates. How are failed patches handled in test and approve? The main question why we are testing the patches is to see if it is causing any issue or failures in our test machine. So, if you have selected automatic approval of patches after testing, remember the patches that are successfully installed in at least one of the machines and have not failed in any of the test machines will only be approved. So, ultimately, if patch has failed in the test group, it's important that we focus on resolving it based on the troubleshoot article added because the same might occur in our production machines as well. So, if you are able to find the root cause on the test machines and sort them, we can stop such cases happening to our production environment. How can I see what are the patches released in this patch history cycle and see all the missing systems? I hope you are aware of the option we saw in the patch management section, where we created a filter to see the critical patches. When you get into the missing updates of the console, you have a lot of filters to see the critical patches, in which release date is one among them. So you can use the release date filter to view the updates released in this month, or we also get a separate view called latest patches in the patch management view. So to show you, you can navigate to the Endpoint Central console and under threats and patches, under patches view, you will have a view called latest patches where you will have the latest patches listed over here. And if you want to filter based on the release date, you can use the filter option here and you can choose the criteria as release date and you can filter for the respective patches. So moving to some patches have the description of reboot may require. Why is this? Let's say you are installing a security update that updates the DLL that has loaded in one or more processes that are required by Windows. This security update cannot be completed while the DLL is loaded on the client machine. Only after restarting the machine during the system startup, these patches will get applied. In such cases, the status of the patch will be added as may require. So we also have the next training sessions coming on. It's about unified endpoint security, and this will happen on June 21st. So we are in the question and answer session, and we also plan for a live Q&A session. So if you have any questions with what we have seen so far, you can raise it in chat support, so we will be able to answer it. So there is a question from Fadi Almazak. So is it possible to get a trial? I am trying to leverage the free edition for the time being. Yes, Fadi, we are providing you with a 30-day free trial for the product evaluation. So it will be coming up with all the features and you can add n number of devices. And only when the 30-day ends, it will be moving to the free edition. And from Earl Moore, is there anywhere to integrate with VMware to create a snapshot prior to performing a patch on servers? So Earl, as I mentioned during the deployment policy section, we have an option to include the custom script in deployment policy. So if you can create a script for taking a VM snapshot, you can upload the script over there and you can execute it before beginning the patch deployment. And the next question is from Niket Desai. We have multiple systems need to install old patch which is pending from 2010. Niket, usually the latest patches released by Microsoft will have the fixes for the previous patches as well. So if you onboard those machines in Endpoint Central, it will be discovering the latest patches applicable for it, and you will be able to deploy the same. In this way, you will be able to include the fixes for the previous patches as well. In case if you want to apply the older patches as well, then Endpoint Central supports the last 90 days old patches, which is superseded by Microsoft. So once you enable this option in Endpoint Central, you will be able to obtain the old patches and you will be able to scan them for in your environment and you can deploy the same to your endpoint. And the next question is from Allah Helmadi. So will it collect all the third-party software updates? So we from Endpoint Central supporting 500 plus third-party application. So we have an article which lists the third-party application that we support. So you can refer to the same for obtaining the list. So I believe that's all the questions. So thank you all for joining the session. So we also request the participants to rate this webinar on a scale from 1 to 5, where 5 is the best. In case if you need a personalized desktop central demonstration, please do reach out to the chat support where they will be able to organize it. And thank you everyone for joining this session on your busy schedule. You guys all have a great day. Thank you.